Let's discuss another process for concentrating ore, that is froth flotation. This is a very common method for concentrating ore, and specifically sulfide ores are concentrated by this process. So it's generally done for sulfide ores like galena, PBS, zinc blende, ZNS, etc. The basic principle behind this method is the difference in the wetting properties of ore and impurities. So basically, here the principle used is the difference in the preferential wetting of ore and impurity. Basically, wetting refers to the interaction with a solvent. So we have two things here. We have ore and impurity. These two have to be separated from each other. And as it is seen in the diagram, there are two solvents available. First is water and the other one is oil. So it's written in the diagram, water containing pine oil. So there are two solvents, water and oil, which have nature opposite to each other. They do not mix into each other. And oil being less denser than water, it has a tendency to form an upper layer. Similarly, here there are two things, ore and impurity, which have different natures, and the property which we are using here is the difference in their wetting properties. So in this, basically, ore gets wet with oil, and the impurity, it gets wet with water. So getting wetted is basically interacting with the particular solvent. So when I'm saying that ore is getting wetted with oil, it means that ore will attract towards oil, and anything which attracts towards oil is hydrophobic and it will repel water. So ore and impurity are such that one is attracted towards oil, the other one is attracted towards water, two solvents which do not mix into each other. So it's very clear from the diagram. What we are doing is we are taking a tank. This is called flotation cell. This tank is called flotation cell. And in this we have put water and oil mixture. The oil we are using is pine oil. However, we can use any other oil also, like eucalyptus oil, camphor oil, but most commonly pine oil is used. Then what we are doing is, in this mixture of water and oil, we are putting the ore that has to be concentrated, which is what? Which is a sulfide ore. Now a question may arise, why only sulfide ores are taken here as an example? Because hydrophobicity of sulfide ores is maximum. They are most hydrophobic. Among all the different types of ores, these sulfide ores are most hydrophobic. That is, they are to a maximum limit, they are repelled by water, attracted towards oil. So here we will put the impure ore which has to be concentrated, and we are passing compressed air through this instrument. This is known as an air sparger. This instrument is known as air sparger. It has holes through which air comes out with pressure. Now as this setup is made, the process begins and ore gets wetted with oil. Now oil has a tendency to float over water, one thing. Secondly, here the air particles also attach with ore. So both of these things make ore pass into froth. Ore becomes light due to its interaction with oil and air. It becomes light and it is carried over to the surface in the form of froth bubbles. So this is very visible in the diagram. These are sulfide ore particles which are appearing in the form of bubbles. While the impurities, on the other hand, because they are wetted with water, they remain suspended in the water and oil mixture as it is. Sometimes, because the impurities are generally heavy, they get settled at the bottom, which has been denoted by gangue, which is another name for impurities. So in this way, ore and impurities are separated from each other on the basis of their differential wetting or their preferential wetting or difference in their wetting properties. We'll come on to the next method for concentration, that is magnetic separation. The third method is magnetic separation, or more correctly it should be called electromagnetic separation. Electromagnetic separation. Now here, as the name suggests, the principle behind this method is the difference in the magnetic properties of ore and impurities. So difference in magnetic property refers that either of the two is magnetic, the other one is non-magnetic. Maybe the ore is magnetic, impurities are non-magnetic, or vice versa, the impurities are magnetic but the ore is non-magnetic. So in any of the two cases, magnetic separation can be employed as a method of concentration. We can easily understand this method from the diagram. There are two rollers, one of which is magnetic. This roller is magnetic. The other one is non-magnetic. And there's a belt which runs over the two rollers. This is a movable belt. It is moving in this direction, which is shown by arrows. Over the belt, we are putting the ore, the impure ore which has to be concentrated. And the ore contains such impurities that there's a difference in the magnetic properties of the two. So when the impure ore is put over the belt, it moves along with the belt. And as soon as it comes near to the magnetic roller, whichever is the magnetic component, maybe the ore or the impurity, it gets attracted towards the roller. The other component, the non-magnetic component, it is repelled or it is simply pushed away from the roller. So there are two bundles, two heaps of ore and impurity. The magnetic component attracted towards the roller falls beside it, and the non-magnetic component is separated. So in this way, using electromagnets, we can separate ore and impurity. Now this can be done for magnetic ores as well as for non-magnetic ores which have magnetic impurities. So these were the methods for concentration of ore. Now once the ore is concentrated, we can come over to the next step, which is the extraction of metal from the concentrated ore. So till now we've covered two steps. First was crushing and grinding, second was the concentration of ore. Now this is the third step in metallurgy. So once the ore is concentrated, what we can do is extraction of metal from the concentrated ore. Now this step, extraction of metal from the concentrated ore, it is divided into two sub-steps. First sub-step is conversion of ore into metal oxide. So the ore which has been concentrated in the previous step is converted into the corresponding metal oxide. And the second sub-step, what we do is the reduction of metal oxide. So first we are converting the ore into oxide, and then for the extraction of metal, what we are doing is we are reducing the metal oxide. We'll start with the first step, conversion of ore into oxide. So whichever may be the ore, maybe the sulfide, carbonate, sulfate, nitrate, halide, hydrated, carbonate, or any other ore, we can first convert it into oxide by two methods. First is calcination, and the second method is roasting. So these two methods are employed for the conversion of ore into oxide. In calcination, the ore is heated in the absence of air. So we can do it for Most commonly carbonate ores. It can be done for hydrated ores, and even oxide ores are calcined. So this is a very simple process in which the ore is heated in the absence of air. We can take an example of it like calamine, zinc carbonate. It is simply heated. It converts into zinc oxide, producing CO2. Similarly, we can take any hydrated ore like Al2O3.2H2O, which is the ore of aluminium called bauxite. It is heated. It converts into Al2O3 aluminium oxide, giving out water. The main purpose of calcination is to convert the ore into the corresponding oxide. This is the primary function, primary aim of calcination. But apart from this, there are two other advantages of calcination, or two other purposes for which calcination can be carried out. Now, because this process is employing heating, that is why when the ore is heated, first, as in the bauxite example, we can say, first advantage is moisture is being removed. So in case there is any moisture, in case there is any water in the ore, it can be removed. And secondly, if there are some volatile impurities still left in the ore, specifically organic impurities, organic matter is there, some volatile matter is there, so those impurities are also removed. So basically calcination is done for the conversion of ore into oxide, but apart from this it can also be done to remove moisture and to remove impurities which are volatile in nature. That is why, although this step is for conversion into oxide, I have written example oxide here. Why do we need to calcine an ore which is already in the form of its oxide? Because in case moisture is there, in case some volatile impurities are there, they can be removed. Calcination is done in special furnaces called reverberatory furnace. Calcination is done in reverberatory furnace, and the product of calcination is called calcine. Now we come to roasting. Roasting is the heating of ore in the presence of air. Now this is very important to be noted down. Calcination is done in the absence of air and roasting is done in the presence of air. This is the main difference between calcination and roasting. Both are employing heating of ore, conversion of ore into oxide. This is the common factor between the two. But the difference is calcination is done in the absence of air, roasting is done in the presence of air. And commonly sulfide ores are roasted. We can take an example like PBS, galena, which is an ore of lead. It is heated with oxygen, it is roasted, it converts into PbO along with SO2. Similarly, zinc blende, it is also roasted and it converts into zinc oxide, giving out SO2. This SO2 can be used in contact process for the manufacturing of sulfuric acid or for any other use. So again, because we are employing heating during roasting, it will also serve the same two purposes as calcination. What? Moisture will be removed and impurity will be removed. So again, commonly calcination roasting, they are done to remove moisture, to remove impurities and to convert the ore into the corresponding oxide. Roasting is also done in the same furnace, that is reverberatory furnace. But when calcination is being done in the furnace, there will be no supply of air And when roasting is being done in the furnace, air will be supplied in excess. So this was the first sub-step in the extraction of metal. The second sub-step is once the ore has been converted into oxide, it is reduced. So reduction of metal oxide. Now a question may arise in your mind, what is the need for the first sub-step? That is, what is the need to convert carbonate or sulfide or whatever ore first into oxide and then it is being reduced? Because it is more easier to reduce metal oxides rather than carbonates or sulfides. So it has become an essential step in metallurgy that the ore has to be converted into oxide because reduction of the oxide is comparatively easier. Now, when we are reducing the metal oxide, we have to keep in mind the nature of metal. So, the different methods which are available for this step, through which we can reduce metal oxide, the choice of the method will depend upon the nature of metal. And when we are saying the nature of metal, what we will keep in mind or what we will consider is the reactivity of metal. So it is basically the reactivity of metal based on which we will choose one method out of the several available. Now talking about reactivity of metal, we have already studied reactivity series. Metals are placed in the reactivity series in the decreasing order of the reactivity. So the metal placed at the top will be most reactive, the one which is placed at bottom will be less reactive or least reactive. So on the basis of reactivity, we can form three categories of metals. Metals which have very low reactivity, which are very less reactive, which are placed at the bottom of the reactivity series. Second category can be of metals which have moderate reactivity, which are not very less reactive, which are not very highly reactive, which are placed in the middle of the reactivity series, and metals which are very reactive or which are highly reactive, which are placed at the top of the reactivity series. So on the basis of nature, on the basis of reactivity of metal, we can form three categories: metals at the bottom, metals in the middle, and metals at the top of the reactivity series. Different methods are employed for the reduction of metal oxides of these three categories. So first we'll consider metals which have very low reactivity, less reactive metals. Now when we are saying the metal is less reactive, it means its oxide won't be very stable, because the metal has very low tendency to react with oxygen, to form bond with oxygen. Their oxides will be less stable. And so the oxides can be reduced simply by heating. So reduction of metal oxides of less reactive metals can be reduced simply by heating. For example, we can take an example of mercury. Mercury is a very less reactive metal. Its ore is cinnabar, whose formula is HGS. Now because it is a sulfide ore, the process employed for its concentration will be froth flotation, and during the first sub-step, that is conversion to oxide, we will roast cinnabar. So cinnabar is heated with air, it is roasted in the reverberatory furnace, it converts into mercuric oxide, giving out SO2. Now because HgO is not very stable, mercury is a very less reactive metal, that is why during this roasting process only, this HgO will get heated to form mercury, giving out oxygen. So during the process of roasting, we will get liquid mercury as the metal will be extracted. We will now take the second category of reduction, that is metals which have moderate reactivity. So moderately reactive metals. Now, in order to reduce the oxide of moderately reactive metals, we cannot employ heating here because the oxides of these metals will be a bit more stable as compared to those of less reactive metals. So they cannot be reduced simply by heating. The method which is used here is chemical reduction. So the oxides of moderately reactive metals are chemically reduced. That is, we will use some reducing agent for their reduction. Reducing agent is any substance which itself undergoes oxidation and reduces the other substance with which it reacts. Common reducing agents are, most commonly what we use is coke, that is a form of carbon. Reduction by using coke is known as smelting. This term is very important, commonly asked in a number of exams. The process using coke as reducing agent is called smelting, which is carried out in blast furnace. For example, hematite, Fe2O3. Iron is a moderately reactive metal. It is reduced, its oxide is reduced with carbon, converts into iron metal, giving out carbon monoxide. So this process is known as smelting. Now here two terms are extremely important. One is flux, the other is slag. Now what happens generally is the ore which is being smelted is not 100% pure. It may still contain some impurities, and for the removal of those impurities we add a substance which is known as flux. So flux is any substance which is added during smelting to remove gangue. Like in the same example of hematite, along with the ore, that is hematite, calcium carbonate, limestone is added. So it's basically a mixture of these three: hematite, coke, which is acting as a reducing agent, and limestone. Because this process employs heating in the furnace, limestone gets heated, it converts into calcium oxide, giving out carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide again reacts with carbon. It converts into carbon monoxide, which is also utilized as a reducing agent. And this calcium oxide liberated here acts as flux. The impurity generally associated with hematite is silica, SiO2, which is acidic in nature. So the impurity is acidic, the flux is basic because it is a metal oxide, it is basic in nature. Flux reacts with impurity and forms calcium silicate, which is known as slag. So slag is a term given to the product of flux and gangue. Flux, it reacts with gangue and removes gangue in the form of slag. Another reducing agent which can be employed is carbon monoxide. So instead of coke, carbon monoxide can also be used. For example, Mn2O3 plus CO, it gives manganese metal along with CO2. Most commonly, the reducing agent which is used is aluminium. Aluminium is also used as a reducing agent. For example, Mn2O3, it reacts with aluminium to form manganese along with Al2O3. Initially, for this reduction, heat is given. But when this process starts, it proceeds, energy is released. That is, it is an exothermic process. And we are using aluminium as a reducing agent. So this process is known as aluminothermy. Or simply, Thermite process. Very commonly employed in the welding of broken railway tracks, where Fe2O3 is reduced with aluminium. Iron metal is formed in the molten state because it is extremely exothermic process, and it solidifies and fills the gap later on. So this process is known as thermite process. This reaction is known as thermite welding. Now there are a number of reasons for using aluminium. Basically here aluminium is acting as a reducing agent. Why? Because it has affinity towards oxygen. It can easily react with oxygen to form Al2O3 and the metal can be extracted out. So a question may arise that why only aluminium? There are other metals which are more reactive like magnesium, sodium, calcium. We can use them also as reducing agent, right? But there are certain reasons for using aluminium as reducing agent. First reason is aluminium is most abundant metal. It is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust. So it is easily available, it is cheap, and secondly, the Al2O3 formed, which is formed as a byproduct, it can never contaminate the metal. So there is no contamination. Why am I specifying this point is, during the smelting process, when we are using carbon as reducing agent, there are chances that the metal extracted is contaminated by carbon. Here there is no such disadvantage. It is cheap, easily available, most abundant, and more importantly, it does not contaminate the metal. And metal and Al2O3, they form two separate layers, different layers, which can be easily separated from each other. After this step, we can discuss the third category of metals, that is highly reactive metals. Now highly reactive metals have very stable oxides. They form very stable oxides which cannot be reduced by heating, which cannot be reduced by chemical reduction. So the method employed for the reduction is electrolytic reduction. We can understand this electrolytic reduction by taking an example of metal aluminium. The ore of aluminium is bauxite, Al2O3.2H2O. It is first concentrated, the gangue is removed, and once it is concentrated, this ore is impure. Once it is concentrated, it converts into pure Al2O3. And pure Al2O3 is called alumina. So electrolytic reduction is carried out of alumina, not of bauxite. We always say electrolytic reduction of alumina and not electrolytic reduction of bauxite because bauxite is impure, and once we concentrate it, it converts into pure Al2O3, which is called alumina. We can understand electrolytic reduction of alumina by the diagram given. Here it consists of an iron vessel. This is an iron vessel. It is lined with cathode. Cathode is made up of carbon, graphite. So this is cathode graphite lining, which acts as a negative terminal. And here clamped with copper are a number of rods. These act as anode. These are also made up of carbon and these act as anode. The liquid shown, that is the electrolyte. And this electrolyte consists of molten Al2O3 and Na3Alf6, which is called cryolite. It is also an ore of aluminium. Most important ore is bauxite and second most important ore is cryolite. Now once the setup is made, carbon lining graphite that acts as cathode, the carbon rods which act as anode, there is electrolyte which is a mixture of Al2O3 and cryolite. The process of electrolysis begins. When the electricity is passed, the process of electrolysis begins, and Al2O3 dissociates on passing electricity as aluminium ion and oxide ion. Aluminium ion and oxide ions. Now these ions get attracted towards the oppositely charged electrode. So aluminium will move towards cathode, which is negatively charged, which is the graphite lining of the tank, and oxide ion will get attracted towards the anode rods. At cathode, which is negative, aluminium ions will gain electrons to convert into aluminium metal. Gaining of electrons is called reduction. So during electrolysis, the metal ions are reduced at cathode. This is very important to remember. Where the metal is being extracted is being extracted at cathode, which is a negatively charged electrode. So this molten aluminium, as it is shown in the diagram, it forms a layer at the bottom of the iron tank and can be extracted out from the outlet. And the oxide ions move towards anode, which is the positive terminal. Here the oxide ions lose electrons to convert into neutral atom, but because one atom of oxygen is not stable, this reaction proceeds as this. So oxygen is being released at anode. Anode rods are made up of carbon and oxygen is being relieved. They react with each other, forming CO2. This is again important to remember that here anode rods are being consumed. So they have to be replaced from time to time. Because they are reacting with oxygen and they are escaping in the form of CO2, anode rods have to be replaced periodically. Now what is the role of cryolite here? A question may come into your mind. The metal is being extracted from Al2O3. Why are we taking a mixture of Al2O3 and Na3AlF6 here? Basically, we take a mixture of Al2O3, Na3AlF6, that is cryolite, and fluorspar, CaF2. This mixture is taken as electrolyte during the electrolytic reduction of alumina. Although the metal is being extracted from alumina, the ore is alumina here, but still it is not taken in its pure form because it has two disadvantages associated with it. First is, it is a poor conductor of electricity. And because we are talking about electrolytic reduction, the process of electrolysis will involve two major necessities or requirements. First, the electrodes, cathode and anode, and second is the electrolyte, which should be a good conductor of electricity. But here Al2O3 is a poor conductor and so it cannot be taken in pure form. When we convert this into mixture, when we take a mixture of Al2O3, cryolite and fluorspar, because fluorspar is ionic compound, it dissociates and it increases the number of free ions available, and thus this entire mixture becomes a good conductor of electricity. So this disadvantage, this problem here is solved when we take alumina in the form of mixture of these three. The second disadvantage is that the melting point of alumina is somewhere around 2000 degrees Celsius. Because obviously we cannot take Al2O3 in solid form, we have to take it in fused form, molten form. And the melting point of Al2O3 is 2000 degrees Celsius, but the boiling point of aluminium is somewhere around 1800 degrees Celsius. So even if we melt Al2O3 anyhow by more consumption of electricity, the aluminium extracted will vaporize because its boiling point is below 2000 degrees Celsius. So this is another disadvantage, and that is why mixture is taken whose melting point is 900 degrees Celsius. So both of these problems are solved when alumina is taken in the form of mixture. Moreover, cryolite is also an ore of aluminium. Apart from alumina, aluminium can also be extracted from cryolite. So with this we finish the third step of metallurgy. Coming on to the last step of metallurgy, that is refining of the extracted metal. So once the third step is finished, what we will get is the extracted metal. But that metal will be impure, which is called crude metal. Impure metal is called crude metal. In the last step of metallurgy, we will purify the metal, we will remove the impurities associated with it. So again, there are a number of methods involved in this step, the choice of which will depend upon the nature of metal and of course the nature of impurities. Which method will be selected for refining of a particular metal will be decided on the basis of these two factors, the nature of metal and the nature of impurities.